Please give up some warm country fair love for Michelle Ruiz-Keil.
Hello, hello. Yup, now I'm on. You know, it helps to be a master of your craft, though. Can we just give a hand to our sound people who have supported all of us to use our words and talk to y'all this whole weekend? Thank you. This has been such a gracious and welcoming and inclusive and inspirational time for me. I'm not an Oregon Country Fair regular, but I did come once many years ago. A friend of mine had an extra pass, and I got to go and camp with her and her family. And the experience of the fair at nighttime just completely blew my mind. I'm like, I knew it all along. Magic was real, and here it is. So that moment really stayed with me, and later, it presented itself again in my first book. So, and that is sort of the reason that I'm here. Leah, our front porch coordinator, woo! Read the book and got in touch and said, you know what, we've got to do this. Of course, that was 2019, and then, as we all know, here we are now. So I have a second book out now, but I want to take a little time to give some love to my first book and to read you that little passage that takes place at the fair. So the book is called All of Us with Wings, and it is a coming-of-age story about a 17-year-old named Sochi who's on her own after running from a painful past and completely on her own in San Francisco. She meets a precocious tween named Palace in Golden Gate Park and is brought home to dinner and is surprised to find that Palace lives in one of those beautiful, huge Victorian mansions perched near Buena Vista Park over the Haight-Ashbury, and that her family is an infamous group of pagan polyamorous underground music legends. Right? So once upon a time, a girl with no family, no friends, that knows no one, ends up in this sort of amazing, dreamy place, and all she wants to do is just leave her past behind and dive into this new, amazing, glamorous, fascinating world. And she's welcomed really warmly by the family. But of course, it's a coming-of-age story, and in those kinds of stories, your past is not something you can run away from. It's something that you have to confront and process and integrate so that you can really grow into the person that you're meant to be. So her story is the story of how she integrates the person she's becoming with the person that she was. It's also a story about trauma and healing. And I wanted to talk for 1 second about that. There's been a lot of writing in the literary world lately about what's called the trauma plot, which is that we understand trauma more now. We understand its effects on our lives, our stories, and our bodies. But there has been some writing that I've read that talks about the trauma plot as just almost like a plot device, almost like the way that sometimes violence toward women is almost like a plot device to kind of move a story along. And what I really wanted to write when I was writing about trauma was to write about the reclamation part, about reclaiming power, agency, personal sovereignty, and pleasure, especially pleasure after abuse, and how that can be a really, 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 really messy process sometimes, and how we have to try a lot of different things before we can find that again sometimes. So that's this kind of story. That's the kind of story this is. But the part that I'm going to read is a part where her past begins to sort of tap her on the shoulder. And fittingly enough, since we were just talking about dreams, it starts with a dream. Let's see. Sochi had a vivid dream of running through the forest on the heels of a brown-skinned boy with streaming hair and silent feet. His sweet voice perched in her ear, soundless, yet somehow clear. "This way, little sister." Sochi follows, loping through the undergrowth. A bird wings through the canopy, black feathers, red head, pale sky. Trees give way to a road, the blacktop oddly comfortable under her bare feet. A sign on a rough wooden post, the gray of a gravel parking lot, the entrance to Richardson Grove State Park. Sochi sat up blinking in the cranberry light from the stained glass windows that circled her little room. Since leaving Badger Creek, she'd only allowed herself thoughts of home in strictly measured doses. Surely now, she could grant her mind a little leeway. She retraced the dream, traveling the section of Highway 101 that ran through Richardson Grove, then slipping back to the first time she'd seen a redwood. Sochi had been 9, almost 10, and spent most of the drive from Oregon lying down, mourning what she'd been forced to leave behind. Her mother, Gina, had met Evan 3 nights before at the Oregon Country Fair. She and Sochi were supposed to be there with Gina's boyfriend, Adam, helping sell the silver jewelry his dad had made all winter. Adam was nice. He liked kids and talked to them like regular people. His big hippie family was nice, too. They'd caravanned to Southern Oregon in a line of beat-up Volvos and colorful VW buses. Adam said the country fair was like a village out of a fantasy book. Music everywhere, delicious food, and booths full of beautiful wares for sale, all handmade. Children could run wild, eating cream puffs and berry pie with painted faces and bare feet. Every evening, a special parade came through the fair to honor the famous dragon. When he passed, Adam said to chant, "Make way, make way, make way for the magic of the dragon." The day the fair opened, so she spent most of her time alone. All the kids in Adam's family were either much younger and had fair friends and wanted to see their fair friends without a stray 10-year-old tagging along. So she also got the feeling the 3 older girls didn't approve of her and her mother. She heard them saying Gina was just using Adam. So she hoped they were wrong. Walking the figure-8 path that curved around the main fairgrounds, she was happy to wander alone. Performers danced on stilts, played old-time music on washboards and accordions, did acrobatic tricks on a trapeze, and told silly, slightly dirty jokes. There was a drum circle with so many drums that Sochi couldn't count them all. How did they all know how to play in rhythm? Sweaty, muscular boys jerked their arms and tossed their heads. Big-hipped women in long skirts and halter tops swung in sexy spirals. A boy of 4 or 5 pulled Sochi into the circle of bodies. She held his hands and danced until they had to rest, sprawling on hay bales and drinking the herbal iced tea his brown shirtless mother bought for both of them. On the second day, Sochi found a secret theater tucked in a grove of trees, the dusty ground lined with rugs and cushions, the stage hung with silver stars. As she sat down, the most mesmerizing women she'd ever seen shimmered onto the stage. Moving like they had liquid under their skin instead of bones, their made-up eyes held secrets she needed to understand. They reminded her of her mother in a way. Gina was like a slinky cat everyone wanted to touch. The belly dancers were similar, with everyone under their spell. Sochi sat in the front row as troop after troop performed. At the end, a single woman took the stage. She was older than many of the other dancers, curvy and soft and absolutely regal. She looked right into Sochi's eyes, her gaze like a present without strings attached. Sochi imagined being a woman like that, strong and free. She saw herself listening to music and reading lots of books. She would love someone who liked animals and could be a friend. Other women would want to hug her, laugh with her, share their dreams, and tell her their problems. They wouldn't be jealous or afraid like they were with her mom. As good as days were at the fair, nights were even better. When the heat of the afternoon waned and all the regular fairgoers went home, the workers and vendors had their chance to play in the fairy-lit village. Music rang from every corner, and food booths kept producing their delicious specialties, but the lines were short, and the damp night air settled the fine dust on the paths into a velvet carpet under Sochi's bare feet. On the final night of the fair, Gina took Sochi, who was filthy with dust and all the sticky things she'd been eating, to the communal baths called the Ritz. While they waited in line to get in, Gina explained that inside, past a dressing room, there was a wooden deck with open-air showers and a big redwood sauna. Men, women, and kids all cleaned up together. Sochi worried a little about the nakedness, but once they were inside, it was wonderful, clean and calm, lights low so you could see the moon and stars, gloriously hot water, and happy faces everywhere you looked. The fair was having a great effect on Gina. It was the first vacation she'd had in years. With no tables to wait, no orders to take, and enough sleep, Gina was an entirely different person. She shampooed Sochi's hair, scrubbed her back with almond-scented soap, surrendering to the delicious feeling of her mother's hands on her scalp. Sochi thought she must be imagining the music. Of all the wonderful, crazy storybook things Sochi'd seen at the fair, the grand piano in the bathhouse was the best. Sochi and Gina took their time getting dressed, staring up at the dazzling stars and enjoying the rich music. By the time they left, Sochi was clean and warm, her usual rat's nest of tangles flowing in silky waves down her back. After dinner, Gina took Sochi to see the fire show in the meadow. In the rosy light of the flaming batons, Gina was a fairy princess. Her blonde hair and light eyes made it hard for people to believe she and Sochi were mother and daughter. The gauzy clothes she'd gotten from the fair suited her more than the tight jeans, tank tops, and high heels she wore at home. She looked way too young to be anyone's mother. When Evan saw her, it was like a barn owl and a mouse. Sochi knew what was coming from the second he said hello. Her mother knew the owl and mouse dance very well, only Evan probably had it backward. Gina was never the mouse. They left Adam without saying goodbye. All of Sochi's things left at Adam's were forfeit. All she owned in the world now were 5 stuffed animals, 3 days' worth of clothes, and a mother who had dragged her through at least 4 different lives on the way to the perfect fairy tale ending Sochi knew would never come. Evan and Gina wanted her to ride in the cab with them, but Sochi refused and climbed in the back. The camper shell was old and leaked in the corner, Evan said, but it wasn't likely to rain. He'd opened the side window so she'd stay cool, duct taping a rip screen to keep out the bugs. Laying on a bed of their 3 sleeping bags, Sochi tried to ignore the sweaty man smell of Evan's things and pretended she was someplace else. When the truck stopped, Sochi expected to see another gas station in some stupid, ugly town. But she climbed from the tailgate into a world of branches and green light. Forgetting to give Evan the silent treatment, she whispered, "What is this place?" Unlike most of Gina's new boyfriends, Evan hadn't tried to get in good with Sochi to impress her mom. It was usually so gross and fake and a total waste of time. Sochi was determined to hate them all on principle, and Gina wanted a man for herself, not a father for her kid. But now, Gina was in the restroom, and Evan joined Sochi on the tailgate as she craned her neck to see the tops of the trees, savoring the spicy redwood perfume. "Smells good, doesn't it?" Evan said. His voice had a Northern California lift, sort of like a surfer guy from Santa Cruz, but not quite. Evan was so tall, 6'4", according to Gina, but even he seemed puny under those gigantic trees. "See those signs over there?" He pointed to the entrance of the gravel parking lot. "It says Richardson Grove State Park, but I've always thought this looked a lot more like Middle Earth." Sochi looked directly at Evan for the first time. His Tolkien reference wasn't much, but it was a start. "You're right," she said. "It does." So thank you, and thank you for, all being a part of this place that gave me such amazing inspiration. Thinking back to that time that I came here, I hadn't yet begun that book, and I hadn't yet begun my journey as a writer. And that, although I say that now, and every time I say that, my partner, who's known me for 35 years, says, "That's not true. The first time I tried to get you to go out with me, you said no because you had to stay home and write." And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, like my little story about myself and what writing meant to me then. And I think what I meant when I say I didn't write was that I didn't write with a sense of wanting to write for publication. I didn't write, I knew I was trying to use writing as a practice to form myself as an artist. I was an actor at that time. I was deeply into studying method acting. I definitely connected that story was a part of something for me. I practiced divination and tarot and had since I had been a young teenager. So all of these things were woven into what I was experiencing, but I did not call myself a writer or an artist at that time. And I've been thinking a lot about our entrance into that space of allowing ourselves to belong to the work that we want to do in the world and to the things that are so deeply important to us. And this is funny. I just listened to someone waxing long and lovingly about the 60s and the Beatles. But there's this Beatles song that I always think of, and it's a really weird one because it's getting better all the time. But if you read the lyrics to that song, I mean, there's this part that goes, I used to be mean to my woman. I beat her and kept her from the things she loved. Man, I was mean, but I'm changing my scene and I'm doing better all the time or something. And I know, right? I was like, what? Yes. I mean, honestly, Google. I mean, if I'm wrong, that's going to be really embarrassing, but I swear that is right. Jesus. Okay. Right. Okay. So it was really funny because I had that song in my mind and I was like, what are they saying in there? And then I was like, oh my God, I realized I kept myself away from the things that I loved. I did that to myself. I didn't have to, insert some person in my life to do that for me. I had taken on the job as well. And so I started thinking about that too. Why do I keep myself apart from the things that I love? And how can I open the door to those things and allow myself to claim them? And so I guess I'm going to read to you a little bit now from the introduction of All of Us with Wings. It's so fun to get to go back to that book. When you have a new book out, you're like, you have to promote it. That's part of your job. And so you're like out there and you're talking. And I love the new book, Summer in the City of Roses. It is a beautiful book that came to me like a gift, and I appreciate it deeply. But it's really fun to get to revisit this, which is sort of like getting to go back and hang out with your first love. So I hadn't planned to read this, but a lot of the things that I've been hearing today and also the amazing conversations I've been having, you all at this event have some brilliant women just like walking around randomly that you get to like talk to, and your mind is, my mind is being constantly blown. Every time I sit down with someone, it's been really wonderful to be in your company. So I wrote an author's note to this book because it is published as a book for young adults, but it has some pretty difficult subject matter, and we felt the need to contextualize it. It's definitely for older youth. If you're thinking of getting this book for someone that you love, they need to be someone who's ready for kind of a grown-up story and some intensity. And some moral gray area, which, if I get up on my soapbox about literature for youth, I think the gray area is where that needs to land for the most part, because that's what adulthood is. It's really hard to put a pin on, like, this is right and this is wrong and that's the way it is. I think that as we grow, we need to become more nuanced and more comfortable with inconsistency and contradiction. So in that spirit, All of Us with Wings is my first novel. For years, I learned to write within its imagined San Francisco in a time stolen from my daily life as a caregiver, glowing with the secret of the story in my pocket. As the years went on, I wrote to heal myself, to bring my own hidden histories to light. As an abuse survivor and mixed-race Latinx, I have been struggling with empowerment and identity. Though promising and bright, I found myself unable to follow the traditional path of high school, college, and career as the effects of my childhood trauma manifested in adolescence. For many years, I longed for a life that seemed unattainable. The ivy-covered college campus, the cap and gown graduation ceremonies, the fabulous career in theater or law, teachers and family assumed I would pursue. But as I grew older, I began to see the value of a different sort of education, the one I'd given myself. I had to find my own rites of passage, my own path to adulthood. I wanted to write a story about this kind of life, both its struggles and its gifts. So I guess as I had written this book and was preparing to sort of like show my face in the world and get it published, I really thought about that a lot, because I had a lot of, as we all, I think, do as humans going into a new area or even a familiar area, a lot of what we call imposter syndrome. Are people familiar with that term? Does anyone want to like just throw out what that term means to them? Imposter syndrome. Yeah, feeling inadequate, feeling like I don't belong here. Like this is for other people, but not for me. And I definitely had a really intense sense that I had a sense on the one hand that it was for me, but there was that little part that kept me from the stuff I loved, right? That just didn't let myself know it. So I think that the magic that happens when we take ourselves seriously, when we make the space to do the thing that's burning inside of us, when we make the space first to connect with what that thing is, and then we give it the attention and the love and the flexibility it needs to ebb and flow and do its thing and grow and finally sort of move through our bodies and into the world, something else happens. Like things happen in your life as well as in your work. And so one of the things I wanted to ask all of you is there something that you're trying to bring into the world creatively that is being challenging for you to bring right now? And the reason I'm asking you this is because I've been experimenting lately with using divination to solve my creative problems. I use divination as like a very specific practice in crafting a work of fiction. And there are a couple of reasons why I do it. One of the reasons actually comes from my acting training, which is acting is really the art of being in the moment, in every given moment, with text that you have read 100 million times and practiced 100 million times. And so how do you have that reality in the moment with something you're so familiar with? So thinking about that magic that happens on stage because, you know, the words are coming through people's bodies in that moment made me think about how can that come in my book? Because sometimes you can just find yourself putting the pages in and the narrative feels prescribed and you don't know how to bring like the truth, like you feel like I'm not quite telling the true story. This doesn't feel like what's really supposed to happen. And so in those moments, we can use divination to help us find what might be real or more real. And there's a million examples in this book where I did that. I'll use a different one than I have so far, but I was, so there is a point of view character who is a cat in this book. And I want to say that I ask you to take my point of view character cat very seriously because he's not a cute cat. And he's not a he's a badass cat. And also I ask you to take him seriously because this is an homage to a real cat that I knew who was kind of a Haight Street 80s legend, who I had the luck and honor of taking care of him at the bookstore where he worked, which included cleaning his litter box, which I did gladly. I really needed a job. But also I was hired because the cat didn't hate me. He was really prone to biting customers. Like literally, like he would be laying on top of the books and you'd have to know to watch him because someone would be to go like, oh, excuse me, kitty, I'm just gonna So you had to watch. He was 18 years old. He had no fucks left to give. He was done. So, but he was really interesting and really magical. So, as I digress, the cat in the story kind of he's sort of like our detective. He holds the place of a detective in the narrative where he can know things that the main characters can't know because of his access to the more magical corners of the city. And so the cat is trying to figure out what he needs to do to help to help the humans that he feels kind of responsible for. And his person, who's the owner of a bookstore, knows him well and occasionally performs a divination using the I Ching for her cat when he requests it, by bapping the book and giving her the look that's like, do the thing I'm telling you to do, that we all know from cats. So she does it. And so in that moment, I was like, okay, I kind of know what I want to happen, I think, but I think I'm just going to do the divination and see what happens. So I did the divination and something rose up that I had completely forgotten about. And a whole new thing happened in the book. And it was a moment it was a super magical moment. But I think because of the way it came from a non-conscious place, it felt more real. So when you write magical realism, that's the trick. You're writing magic into our everyday world. And I think it has to have that emotional resonance. And I think that sometimes having that other avenue of story, which is more from your subconscious, can really help. So what I would like to do for all of you is to ask you if you're having a story problem, if you're a writer, or an art problem. I spoke to someone yesterday who was having a problem making beautiful glass vessels. And I think that I just want to give you all some tools that I have learned in the last, now I guess in the last 35 years, because I have been writing all that time. But especially in writing my novels, the tools that I have learned more recently to use, that I was using just in my personal life that I've incorporated actually into my work life. So is there anyone that has something they're working on that they're like, ugh, that thing? Yes. Okay, so there's this desire to make art and a challenge making time and space for it. Okay, so often in that situation, I would probably go to the tarot, and I brought my cards. So now I have to sit. Okay. Okay, so I'm just kind of thinking, it's funny, I used to really think hard about the reading that I wanted to give, and now what I do is I kind of turn off my brain, and it works a lot better, I think. And someone recently asked me, how do you do that? How do you turn off your brain? And I think, honestly, it's just a matter of training yourself that when the cards go in my hands, the analytical part of my brain goes off for a sec. Okay. All right, so the card that I drew for this creative conundrum is called Strife, and I can show it to you. It's probably hard to see from where some of you are. It is in the suit of the wands. It is the Five of Wands, and wands, in my practice, wands have to do with will, and will is like there's something you want, there's something you kind of long for, and then there's that will. And so my deck is kind of a controversial deck, actually. It's a Crowley Thoth deck. And Aleister Crowley was, kind of an infamous turn of the century occultist bad boy. And, his bad reputation, I'm sure, is well-deserved. However, he had the sense to collaborate with an amazing older woman who I think was in her 60s when she began the deck, who was a painter, Lady Frida Harris. And Lady Harris had an amazing ability, I feel like, to really put a lot of depth and meaning in the cards, and especially because her practice was occultism through her art. I feel like it's a really good deck, actually, for artists. It's a little esoteric and hard to get your head around, but, there's so many layers that even I think a beginner can get a lot out of this deck. So that's just my little spiel for my deck, which is old, and there's so many, of course, new beautiful decks available now. But for you, with the five is the time that comes right after you've completed something. So you've just finished a big thing, and maybe when you get a 5, the first thing I think of is, do I need to rest? Can I expect myself to do the next thing yet? There's this sense that when you finish one thing, you've got to get back. And I have that feeling. Every time I finish a book, I'm like, there's never going to be another book. It's over. It's done. Unless I get right back on it. And I get really, really super rigid in my anxiety. So my first thought when I see a 5 is am I ready? Have I rested enough? Have I gathered enough so that I can then, because really art is transmutation. You're alchemizing something you're making something out of kind of nothing, And so the other thing I would say, because there's fire in the wands, I've been thinking a lot about alchemy lately and art. And the thing that I would say to you about this especially is that, so in doing alchemy, you need to the first kind of thing, the first big thing you need to do is you need to refine and access your prima materia, your first substance. And that is the stuff with which you're going to actually do all of the crazy operations that you're going to do to it to make it, to turn it to gold, to transform it, to transmute it. So I think that a really beautiful thing to remind yourself of is, and maybe make a list of, is what is my prima materia? What is that for me? Like, for instance, for me, I took this amazing workshop with T. Kira Madden, who wrote Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls. It's a memoir, and a very, very beautifully done memoir, in my opinion. So I took a class with her, wanting to learn from her, and she said that in the world, we're often told, especially women and especially marginalized people and people of color, that you can tell your story and you can tell it once. We have room for one story like yours. It used to even be in publishing, like, I'm sorry, I love your book, but we already have a mixed race Latina book this year. We can't have two. And it's like you've got 27 million, books about, white people's experience, but we can have one of those, though, because we're diverse, So we have the one. We have that space for you, right? So what Kira said, instead of that, she flips it completely and says, I want you to commit yourself to your subjects. I want you to write down, I will always write about whatever it is. So for me, it's like, I will always write about, queer people. I will always write about mixed race people. I will always write about recovering from trauma. I will always write about the body and becoming embodied. I will always write about animals and the natural environment as if they are living and sentient. So those are some of the things that are just, that's what I do. That's my subject. That's what I write about. And even, one book can be, for young adults. My next book is a historical fiction set in the 30s, but those are still my subjects. Even, no matter where they land, I know that'll all be in there. So for you to make a list, what is my prima materia? What are my subjects? And then just let yourself sit with the list. Like, maybe put it under your pillow. We were just talking about dreaming. So maybe read it, before bed, and put it under your pillow, maybe for like a week. And maybe when the moon is full, even, maybe read it aloud and burn it, and like take the ashes somewhere and put them somewhere in your yard or somewhere in flowing water, like to do something symbolic for yourself. Because I think if you're not ready to approach it, either you're scared, your inner voices are bugging you, or you're just not quite ready to do it. So all of this like ritualized preparation allows you to settle into, because doing it, it's really painful. I don't know about anyone else. It's very painful for me to begin a new project. It's like, actually, it feels like nails on the chalkboard almost. It's like, oh, and it's like scary, and it's so hard too. Like, once you have it, you can begin to refine and perfect it. That's the fun. But the other part kind of sucks, at least for me. And so to get yourself sort of ritual, and to like make the rituals beautiful, so you like, so you're like being gentle to your muse, envisioning your muse and making offerings to her or them or him, any muse that you have, things like that. And you'll know what those are for you. Because I feel like we were talking earlier about our pantheons. It was really fascinating. And I was realizing that my pantheon is so specific to myself that I don't know if I could even talk about what it is. And but it's constantly refining itself. And I understand when I talk about my muses, I know who I mean, and I know what I mean. And so to also get in practice with that, because that's sort of the place you can go back to every time to begin again, or when you get stuck, to go back to. So, thank you. Thank you for asking me that. I really appreciate it. Does anyone else have any creative conundrums they are grappling with? Anything else? I thought I saw a hand, but I just see footies back there. I like the feet are good. There's cute pink socks. Anything else anybody wants to add? Okay, I see where you all are at, and I feel like it's still story time now. I see you guys. Okay. All right, the new book emerges. She comes out. Summer in the City of Roses came out last year. It started with, to be a little vulnerable, it started with a story about my own family and a wonder that I had about my own family. And it was, how does a family who has not been able to find community outside their family that fits, and instead has turned inward and become incredibly close in kind of a little micro universe all on their own, happily so while the kids are little, how does that family grow and change to let their kids grow up and move on? And so this was a question that I was grappling with a lot at the time. And then for a really long time, I'd been thinking about Greek mythology and stories around Iphigenia, who was the daughter of Agamemnon, who was sacrificed in a super sneaky, I mean, it's never a nice way to be sacrificed, but it was like so sneaky the way they did it, where her dad was like, to her and her mom, like, come to where the fleet is. You know, we're stuck here because the winds won't, you know, we're out of favor with Athena and the winds won't come. But come here. We think it'll be good luck if you bring our daughter and we marry her off to Achilles. He's a wonderful hero. He's so handsome. You'll love it. And so they come there thinking that there's going to be a wedding, when in actuality, someone has decided the problem is that Agamemnon's daughter was devoted to Artemis, and it made Athena mad, and that's why the wind wasn't happening, and she needed to be sacrificed. And so in order to go and pursue, you know, his brother's quest to win back his sister-in-law, Agamemnon agrees. They call her to where the fleet is, and they take her to what she thinks is her marriage, and they lie her down to be sacrificed. And in some versions, luckily, Artemis spirits her away and substitutes a deer, although not lucky for the deer. But I was thinking about that idea of who we sacrifice and why, and what parts of ourselves get sacrificed and why. So that was kind of also weaving through, because what parts of ourselves do we sacrifice to preserve our family? Because part of the story is that Iphigenia, when she realizes what's happening, she goes anyway. And she does it anyway. So I started thinking about all the ways that we think we're taking care of each other that maybe don't work anymore. And so this story begins when a very devoted mother that is the glue of the family that holds it all together goes on an artist residency for a whole summer and leaves the family alone. Dad decides my neurodifferent, extremely shy and introverted son should go to a wilderness boot camp, because that will like help him commune with nature and become confident. And it'll be great. And someone at his work said their kid went and it was really great for them. I mean, I don't know now what those programs are like, but at the time the book is set, which is in the early 90s, there were some serious problems with a lot of those programs. And so his son is taken there against his will and is in an unsafe place where people are, really asserting their power over him in a scary way. So he escapes with the help of a mouse and a coyote, and has the luck of running into a punk band called the Furies, who happen to be camping over by the Sandy River, and load him into their van and take him to stay with them at their pink ramshackle house over, like, kind of on Belmont, Belmont and 30-something, I would say, with the weedy yard and the like faded pink asbestos shingles. The house is called Penelope. And so they take him in kind of like a stray kitty and, say, okay, you can stay here till you figure this out with your dad. In the meantime, his big sister has found out what her dad did, got furious, slams out of the work event that she was at with her dad, like wearing a fancy dress and painful shoes and leaving her glasses, and finds herself completely and totally lost in Old Town with no idea what to do. And meets a very dapper, attractive, non-binary person on a bicycle with a bow and arrow and a beautiful little mini pit bull sidekick named Scout, and is sort of rescued as well. So both of our innocents are rescued by kind people and go on an adventure to try to find one another that also helps them to find themselves. And then a transformation ensues. So part of this transformation has to do with dreams. I knew that all of the characters in sort of both sides of the story would need to come together around the transformation of the brother. I don't want to spoil it, but a major magical transformation is happening that will really take him away from their family. So in order to create this space, everyone falls asleep together and they dream. And I wanted to just read to you a few of the dreams, like one of the dreams that they had, to kind of end our space as it began with dreaming, and also to talk about divination in a practical way, because I didn't know how to make these dreams. So what I did was I put out all of my tarot and oracle decks, and also a lot of the books I'd been using for research for the novel. And I very quickly grabbed cards and then opened a book and did some bibliomancy, and then tried to just write the dream as quickly as I could. And I wanted the dreams to have dream logic, not my brain logic. And so I feel as if that happened somewhat. So the first dream, just the dream I'm going to read to you, is the dream of a very beautiful teenage girl who has a very wealthy family, whose older sister was a major person in the Riot Grrrl music scene, who had serious depression and who died. Kate is covered in trash. It sticks to her hair in slimy clumps, to her face, to her dress, which is pink as a piglet. Rotting vegetables and old Kleenex and clumps of dirt stick to her skin. And Kate is happy about it. She finds a pit of mud and rolls in it. She then rolls on the newly mowed lawn of her parents' country club. Dry grass sticks to the entire mess, like she's one of those candies covered in chopped nuts. People, her parents, their colleagues from the law firm, her next-door neighbors, and her orthodontist and pediatrician are picnicking on the golf course. She stomps over their blankets to reach all 18 holes. Inside each plastic cup, wedged in the sod, is a small animal. These she rescues and carries away in a basket. The birds and mice and chipmunks and frogs and little garter snakes all sit prettily together, taking great care not to upset one another with any sudden movement. Now she is at the river. She sets the basket down. She sits in the mud at the river's edge, waiting. A person approaches. Her sister, Britta. She holds out a hand. Together, they walk into the river. When the water reaches their shoulders, Britta dissolves, but is still present. Kate's hair grows until it brushes her ankles. She begins to sing. So, that's just a little bit of the dream that came out of the divination. That doesn't feel like it came from me. I don't feel connected to having written that story, but it also really feels like a dream that character would have. So when our last presenter, Tara, was talking about dreaming and said, do I dream with my characters? I think this was a time where I found a way to do that. And so, again, I'm encouraging you to try to find alternative ways outside, linear writing technique to bring the unconscious directly into our stories in an intentional way. So I think that's all I've got for you. If you guys have one more question, if anyone has a question, anything they would just like to add or talk about I'm always interested in your processes as artists. I learned so much from what your processes are. Please feel free to say. I really appreciate you spending this time with me. This is that time in the afternoon. It's like the time where if you're doing summer camp with kids, you have to give them cookies if you want anything to happen. So I'm hoping that there are cookies in your future. Maybe one of those. I know what I want from y'all. What is your favorite? Do you have a favorite yummy juice cooler drink at this fair? Because I've had some really good ones so far, but I really like that kind of thing on a hot day. Any favorites? Which one? Oh, at the Afghan restaurant. Really? What's in it? What's in it? Yumminess. Heaven. At the Afghani. I wanted to go there anyway for food, so I think you may have just sold me. My problem may be solved, but I could have more than one cooler today. Ooh, fizzy? I like fizzy water. Yeah, my other secret to writing, and it's the best secret I can tell you, is cold brew with bubbly water before you write wakes your brain up in a new way. That's right. I have a lot of trouble focusing, people, and that is like, boom. I call it brain juice, but I stole that from a middle grade writer that I used to read to my kids called Hilary McKay. She's British and hilarious, and she called hers brain juice, but hers was Diet Coke and like like Sanka, like powdered coffee together. Can you imagine? So I feel like mine is the bougie version of that. But bubbly water and cold brew, you can't beat it. If you're having a creative block, I think try all that other like woo-woo stuff I said and then do that. Okay, thank you all for being here so much. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Michelle. Give it up for Michelle Ruiz-Keil. One more time.
Give it up for our amazing announcer who's doing so beautifully and has been so kind to me all weekend.
Thank you.
Tell me your name.
Cassandra.
Cassandra.
So she's got books over here.
Oh, yeah, I have books and I'm going to sign over there if you'd like to buy a book.
Yay. Oh, there you go. Testimony.
Kia and Leah both say so you know it's true.
Yes.